And welcome to Ask Rabbi Friday, and I'm here with Coffee, Cookie, and Roxanne. And Roxanne has a cookie also. Yes, these are the famous J. Lee cookies. You want to hear something sad? This is sad. I only have a handful of J. Lee cookies left, but I have to eat them before the Passover because they're made with leaven, which means for 8 days, I will not have cookies. How about that? Tragic, I tell you, tragic. But anyway, this morning, we're taking questions in 719-248-6324. If you got a question, text it, and we'll be more than happy to try to answer it for you, especially questions concerning Passover. Now, for those who may not know, Passover is starting at night, a week from today, Friday night. And hopefully you made your arrangements because we don't have any more seats left. So with that understood, I'll be more than happy to take your questions on Passover or anything else if you would like. So please put it in the text box on either Facebook or YouTube, or text it to that marvelous phone number, which we use every week, 719-248-6324. Got a question? Maybe we have an answer. You know, I used to say we have an answer, but that's too all-inclusive. And there are some things that Roxanne doesn't know. So anyway, so with that understood, Cookie and Coffee is now in play.
Do you have Caster up so we can see both YouTube and...
All right. So, if you would, give us the text and let us know that you're there. If all the text is good morning, give us a good morning text too. So,
Jim Brown is here.
Good morning, Jim.
He said he enjoyed the show last night and the newsroom.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
Do you like our new newsroom? Actually, I don't know. She might be broadcasting next week from Jerusalem, but we'll see. We'll see. We're working on those type of things. And by the power of the instant transport, she might go from Jerusalem to Moscow. We'll see. God is good. And we are funny. Love my coffee. Thank you, Sherry. Thank you, Jaylee, for the cookies. So, if you got a question, you can text or...
Bryn has a question.
Okay, Miss Bren.
Is there a real valley of dry bones? Where is it? Israel? Old area of Babylon? Or is this just a vision of Ezekiel's?
Well, the thing is, the Valley of Dry Bones, I do not believe to be an analogy or a story or anything like that. I think it's a real place. Now, where, I do not know. But here's what I do know. The Talmud tells a story where they were discussing the Valley of Dry Bones, and they were trying to figure out, was it just an allegory or a story or what? And one guy stands up, according to the Talmud, and says, see these tefillin? These were my grandfather's, and he gave them to me. And he was one of those from the Valley of Dry Bones. In essence, he's declaring it was a real deal. They really were brought back to life and really went back to laying tefillin and had prayers and such. So based on that testimony and nothing to refute it, I believe the Valley of Dry Bones was real.
Well,
but where?
We don't know where.
Right.
We do know it's real because God literally took Ezekiel to that place.
That's right.
And he literally put the dry bones together because they were clinking and making noises. And they were all standing there, and they literally had stood up, and then the skin and sinew and everything was put on them by God.
Yep. You know what it reminds me of? Have you ever seen the old Invisible Man where you got the guy there and he's disappearing slowly. The skin's gone, then you see the muscles, and that's gone. Then you see the organs, and that's until he's invisible completely. Just do that in reverse, and I think you have the Valley of Dry Bones. So, now, we have another question.
Jim Brown says, I was just going to say that the Invisible Man movie.
There you go. Jim, we still think alike. Oh, but God is very good. Speaking of good, once again, my coffee, my cookies, my sponsors. Thank you. So we still have a few more new things we're going to be doing very soon with our program on Thursday night. At some point, we're going to shift this program so it's a little bit more technologically advanced also. So hang in there with us. We're constantly working on it. We're also hopefully now to move to a couple more platforms, and that's good. Now, the thing about last night's program that made it unique was also the material we're covering. Most people have heard of the Passover. They know that Jesus was in the Passover, did a Passover, but they don't necessarily understand all the nuances, like the 4 cups. The first cup is a cup of sanctification, being cleansed. The second cup was a demonstration of separation, because none of the plagues fell upon the house of Israel. Then the third cup is the cup of redemption, where God brings back what already belongs to him. And the fourth cup, the cup of Hallel, that's the cup of praise. Now, if I put that in the light of a person's salvation, well, God saves us right where we are, warts, flaws, and all. And then he begins to separate us from the secular world that we just came out of. You know, you might still be kind of uninformed and uneducated, but the moment you gave your heart to God, you became sanctified, okay? And then he begins to reel us in, and that's redemption. And then somewhere along the line in the near future, he'll come to us, or we will go to him, and that will give us praise. Hallelujah. So anyway, if you got a question this morning, maybe we have an answer. Oh, you can put your question, by the way, in the comment box. What we do need, though, for both this program and the other, is for people to hit the like and the share buttons, because that will move us up the ladder of being visible. The more visible we are, the louder we can preach the gospel, the more we can share the Lord with others. So hit the like, hit the share. And what's the other thing? Not sponsor, what do you call them?
I don't know what you mean.
Followers.
Follow, yeah.
Anyway,
Subscribe.
Right. Hit the subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube. Okay, and that helps us. It gives us more presence. So anyway, if you got a question, please put it in. I'm looking forward to Passover. I think we have about 80 people.
Yeah, we have 80. 80.
Have, dinner with 80 good people. That's always a blessing. So now, there's a question. Can tortillas be eaten during Passover? Yes and no. I like a good Jewish answer. If the tortillas are made without leaven, and most are not, by the way, but you want to check the ingredients just to be sure.
They have sodium bicarbonate in it.
Right.
Which is a leavening agent, but it's not chametz.
Okay. That chametz thing. We put a video up already on what chametz is. And sodium bicarbonate and baking powder and egg whites and all those things are not leaven.
They're
Those,
not chametz.
they're not chametz. Okay. So, do I eat tortillas during Passover? Absolutely. And does Roxanne make flatbread for me? Absolutely. And some pita bread is made without chametz. And so that's good too. And by the way, most Chinese food does not have leavening. So between Chinese food and Mexican food, you ought to be in pretty good shape. You'll survive the week.
People think that you can't have wheat, anything with wheat. But if that was the case, we wouldn't be able to have matzah. It's made out of wheat flour or flour. And so it's the leavening that is prohibited.
Right. Okay. It's the yeast that comes from the 5 grains. There's wheat, barley, spelt, rye, and oat. Am I correct?
Mm-hmm.
Of course I'm correct.
Spelt.
Okay. So if your yeast comes from those 5 grains, you're not supposed to eat it. But you can use fruit yeast. And by the way, that's one of the questions I have for you. Since both beer and wine are made with yeast, can you drink those? The answer is yes and no. Of course, yes and no. Okay. The wine, if you ever gone to the grocery store and bought some grapes, especially those Concord grapes, the big fat ones, and they seem like they got that kind of dusty film thing on it, that's fruit yeast. And that's what causes the wine to ferment. Absolutely acceptable. And as far as beer goes, only some beers. And there are some Israeli beers that are made, okay, for this season, which does not use malt or does not use the traditional grain yeast. So as far as the week of unleavened bread, drink wine. Okay.
Anything with malted barley or yeast extract, you gotta get rid of.
Right. So,
which is in a lot of foods, by the way, is flavoring.
Yes. They use it for
Use it for flavoring
as well as for rising.
Yeah.
I wonder, when you pour a beer in a glass and it gets a head on it, is that yeast?
I think so.
That makes it rise?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't drink beer. So why are we waiting for Elijah? Do we know who asked this question?
Evelyn.
Evelyn.
And she says also, what is the foreshadowing?
Okay. If you read the last 3 verses in the book of Malachi, it says that God will send Elijah before the great and notable day of the Lord. Get it? Great. By the way, that's an end time statement. Just like it's used in Isaiah 9:12 and 9:13. The day of the Lord is the coming of God, the coming of the Lord. So the thing about looking for Elijah is based on the scripture in Malachi and what the rabbis are teaching, that the moment you see Elijah, look over his shoulder. Don't pay attention to Elijah a whole bunch. But look over his shoulder and you should see the Messiah, the Mashiach. Now, we also believe, as New Testament believers, that Elijah will be one of the 2 witnesses that will come before Yeshua. So we look for, as New Testament believers, we look for Elijah, knowing once again that the Messiah is shortly behind him. If you would, and I'm speculating here a little bit and throwing out a theory, John the Baptist, Jesus said he truly is Elijah. And yet John says, no, I'm not. No, they weren't in disagreement. John the Baptist was operating in the ministry and the authority of Elijah, but not Elijah. That's a very common thing. Every high priest operates in the authority and the ministry of Aaron. So, or Yeshua operates in the authority and the ministry of Melchizedek. So when we see the 2 witnesses, and one being Elijah, okay, that Elijah will be the real Elijah, because there's 2 people that never died, Elijah and Enoch. 4 says, Enoch walked with the Lord, walked with God, and Enoch was no more because God took him. And of course, the story of Elijah, he's caught up in a whirlwind and on a fiery chariot and taken up to heaven. So, when we see the two witnesses, one might be Enoch, but absolutely the other one's going to be Elijah. And that's why we look for Elijah as our last forewarning of the Messiah. Now, here's something you might not know. When Elizabeth was far along in her pregnancy, and Mary, Marim, she shows up, and she has, in my opinion, the zygote of Yeshua. It must have been 6 or 7 months apart. And don't forget their cousins. I wonder if the same rule won't apply is coming. When we see Elijah, will we see the Messiah within 6 or 7 months? But that's just me speculating. So, and what is the foreshadowing? Foreshadowing are things that are going to happen. It's history that has not played itself out as of yet. So, hopefully that answered some questions or created more. If you have a question, please put it in the comment box, or you can text it to 719-248-6324. And by the way, while you watch the program, go ahead, hit the like button and the share button. No, hit the share button after the fact. This way we're not interrupting what we're doing. Okay? So, what else? This morning, Roxanne, do you have a question?
Nope.
She never has a question.
I know.
Look who she lives with. Okay. So, Ask Rabbi Friday, and we still got 13 minutes. And if I talk fast, we can get in 13 questions. Okay, but that means you got to type them in fast. Okay, and wow, didn't know all that good information. You're welcome. But you know, it makes sense.
Who that is.
Pardon?
I don't know who that is.
What makes it important to understand is that God gives us signs and events to help determine where we are in human history. Yeshua says, interesting enough, can't you discern the signs of the times? You know, we do this every day. When the sky is red at night, when the sky is red in the morning, you know what the weather's going to be like. So it is when it comes to the coming of the Son of Man. Okay, there are the signs. And I think, my opinion, the last one, before the Lord returns, is going to be Elijah and the other witness. So, if you got a question, please text it to us or put it in the information box, comment box on Facebook or on YouTube. And we'll see it.
If somebody doesn't know the signs of the times right now, they're either living under a rock or in denial.
Well, let me kind of give you some signs of the time stuff. Okay. In the last days, the love of many will grow cold. If you haven't noticed, attendance in church and in synagogue has been diminished. Okay. And at the very same time, the world has gone crazier and crazier. Did you know in February there were 85 different events of assaults and attacks on synagogues, and almost 3 times that on churches? We don't live in a very good time, and yet we know the Messiah is coming. Okay?
Jim says, is the appearance of Elijah before the rapture then?
Well, Jim, I don't particularly hold to a rapture theory, because when I did a study of the book of Revelation, I tracked the church through the book of Revelation, and I tracked the Messianics with the church through the book of Revelation. But I would like to be wrong. You know what I mean? I really don't have to go through anything I don't have to go through. But more than anything else, I know the heart of God and his nature. Thus, If there's a rapture, I'm gone. If there isn't a rapture, I'm here. Either way, I'm going to serve him to my last day or until he comes and takes me. So, but if I'm following the concept of a premillennial rapture, Elijah still has to come in the midst of the book of Revelation, which will mean after the fact in a rapture theology.
He says, I'm in agreement.
Okay. See, I think a lot of people, the whole rapture thing is they're ace in a hole. Jesus is my ace in a hole.
Rescue theology.
Yeah. It can be rescue theology, as Roxanne pointed out. But either way, of course, isn't most of the Bible about rescuing us even from ourselves? So, anyway.
How about God rescues us in the midst of the turmoil, like he did with Noah, like he did with Daniel, like he did with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, like he did with the Hebrews in Egypt.
Yep.
There's lots of examples of rescue.
I guess that's why it's
none
called.
of them left the earth.
But I guess that's why they call it being saved.
Mm-hmm. Right. He says at Revelation 3:10 promises protection.
You're correct. Now, let me point a little something out for you. This is my personal Revelation book theory. Okay? I don't believe the saints, suffer through the judgments of the book of Revelation. I think the saints suffer in the book of Revelation because of the ungodly. The same thing was true pretty much with the Black Plague in Europe, because Jews and those who read the scripture didn't eat rats, and they didn't buy into this impurity of going into an outhouse and taking in deep breaths of such stench as supposedly to drive out the demons. Nor did they buy into the idea of gargoyles being so scary that would scare demons. I got news for you. Demons aren't scared. But the early Jews, at that time period, and the early believers, true believers of that time period, who knew the Bible, knew what they were not to do, what they were supposed to do. And when the Black Plague had pretty much ran its course, many of the Europeans looked around and says, how come there are so many Jews left? They didn't suffer like we did. So at that point, more than 300,000 Jews in the known European world, were killed because they were thought to be witches and Jews and such. So anyway, all this to say that God doesn't judge the righteous along with the unrighteous. So my opinion is that we will go through the tribulation if we have to, and the events and the judgments do not fall upon the righteous. Our issue will be the people, not God.
The Antichrist people.
Antichrist people. That's right. There'll also be people who just don't know. They won't be involved on either side. So there will be collateral damage. So if you have a question, please feel free to text or put it in the comment box, and we'll see if we can get you an answer. And we still have, 6 minutes to go. Time for plenty of questions. So, anything else going on?
Nope.
Okay. Somebody's agreeing with us. Now, concerning next week's Thursday night program, it's an important one. But let me go and read this.
This is from Melody. Hello, Rabbi. I have another question about communion. Paul's instructions in 1 Corinthians 10 and 11 for the communion is that for Passover, or is that for Passover, or do we think they were doing another reenactment more frequently? Thanks.
Okay. Communion and the Passover. The communion is supposed to take place in the midst of the Passover. There were those, especially in Corinth, that began to practice it more frequently, but they didn't practice as Passover. They simply took the elements of Passover and created a separate event called communion. By the way, in Hebrew, it's Shulchan Aruch, okay, the holy table, okay, or the table of the Lord, Shulchan Adonai. When we consider what the church now calls communion, okay, it's the idea of once a month getting together and remembering the Lord's death. Okay, fine, no problem. I just wish that most groups would do it honor and actually use unleavened bread. I was going to a congregation, I won't say what brand, in which they had the Lord's Supper once a month. And they always use this big old fluffy Hawaiian bread. No, it's supposed to be matzah.
Wow.
And they had grape juice instead of the wine. And I can understand if you got alcoholics. By the way, grape juice, as long as grape juice is kosher, is acceptable for Passover. It is acceptable for Passover. It's just got to be kosher. So, guess what? Every month, big old fluffy bread came out and grape juice, a little tiny plastic cup, And I just, I can understand the wine thing, but I can't understand the bread, matzah. And if you buy the pre-made Passover, okay, the little tiny unleavened biscuits, that have been far more acceptable. So I think even the Catholic Church uses the wafers, which have no leaven. So as far as 1 Corinthians, they were, I think, the first to actually began to do a remembrance event, but it became popular only after the Council of Nicaea in 326. And that's when they kicked out all the Jews, by the way. So, any other questions? Please feel free. Still got several minutes.
2 minutes.
Here's that phone number.
Nobody's texting you, honey. They're putting it in the chat box.
Or put in the chat box. Oh, the question. So, is grape juice not acceptable for Passover? No, it is acceptable as long as grape juice is kosher. Welch's grape juice is common, it's available, it's kosher, and that's okay.
That's Evelyn.
Okay, so please feel free to have grape juice. Okay.
Well, how is grape juice not kosher? How does it not become kosher? It's already kosher.
Well, the grape juice is kosher, but sometimes you'll find it does not have a kosher seal, and that's because of the bottle. There's some water. Could water not be kosher? It's because the glue that's used to hold the cap on is made out of animal fat.
Which is sometimes pig fat or horse fat.
It's just animal fat. That's all we know. So...
And Bryn says, how do you know if grape juice is kosher? You just explained it.
Okay. Look on the front, and at the bottom, there should be a circle with a U in it, which stands for Orthodox Union. Or it might be a triangle with a K in it.
I think Kedem.
And Kedem is another grape juice.
Is a kosher brand.
Yeah, Kedem is.
You'll find it in the kosher aisle of any store that has a kosher aisle.
Right.
and then Melody says, do you think the Didache is a legitimate document? It seems very Jewish in the introduction and authentic.
The Didache is that which came out of the great dispersion of Jerusalem. And most of the Didache was probably written in the late 1st century through the 2nd century. And come on. I'm trying to think of the city. When the dispersion took place, where did Luke go to school? It's north of Jerusalem. It's outside the country. It'll come to you in a moment. Yes, I think the Didache is interesting and legitimate and probably written by Messianics. Okay. Come on, where do they all go to? My brain is okay.
Is it modern day Syria? Somewhere in modern day Syria?
I'm trying to think of the name. Okay. The disciples went there. Paul was there.
In Turkey?
Yes.
Tarshish?
No. Give me a moment. It'll come to me. Oh.
I can't remember.
Come on, help me here. Hang on. I'm still thinking about it. I'll try not to sign off unless my brain just refuses to work. Okay. Where's my Bible? Here's one of my Bibles. Okay. Hang in there just a moment. The Didache, interesting enough, is almost written like the book of Psalms. Sanhedrin. Damascus. No, not Damascus. No, that's not it. Luke was educated in the city of...
Yeah, I'll find it.
Ask Mr. Phone. Antioch. There it is. Most of the Didache was written in the community of Antioch. And for those who didn't know anything about the diaspora, okay, when the Jews were driven out of Jerusalem and mostly out of Israel, they went to Antioch. It turned into a massive slum area. So, well, now I finally feel better. I got that answered. So I'm going to have to bid you an adieu. But before I do that, number one, don't forget, hit that share button. And number two, don't forget to support your church, your synagogue, your parish. Come alongside. Take your place in leadership. Take your place in servanthood. Don't forget to pay your tithe either, because we got to keep the doors open. And the inflation thing, as much as it hurts you, it really hurts the synagogue even more, or the church. So, let me see, what else do I need to tell? Oh, and don't forget to subscribe. There you go. It'll help us. Now may God bless you and keep you, cause his face shine upon you. Go to church and go to synagogue. And that way, you'll have fulfilled your mission in growing.